Thanks, Dave.
Okay, so the next session is about organizing informal workers, and I think in our discussion today and yesterday we've mentioned informal workers quite a lot, whether they are home-based workers, or domestic workers, or zero-hours contracts, and we've got 3 presentations today, and I'll introduce them one by one. What I'm suggesting is after each presentation, I'll take just about 3 questions for clarification or very specific question, and then we will open it up for general debates. Is that everybody's happy with that? Yeah? Okay, so our first speaker is Laila Azhar from HomeNet, Pakistan. HomeNet is a membership-based organization for home workers and domestic workers that was created in 2005, and she's the executive director. But she's also a member of the steering committee of Social Protection Authority and a member of the Provincial Commission on the Status of Women. But here she's, on behalf of HomeNet Pakistan. Laila.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Hi. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity at a very critical moment when everyone is sleeping, including myself. So I'll just try to focus on what we have done for the 2 important subcategories of informal workers back in our country with the support of our member organizations. HomeNet Pakistan was formed in 2005. It was established in 2005 with a vision that it envisions a society where home-based workers are ensured visibility, recognition, legal social protection, and a decent standard of living. And as the mission states, it's a member of HomeNet South Asia and strives to empower home-based workers to realize their economic, political, and social rights through the strengthening of their respective organization, adoption of fair trade practices resulting in the improvement of their working and living conditions. So why home-based workers? It was established in 2005, but before that, in 1996, and maybe before that, there was a whole discussion of the informal economy increasing in Pakistan and in South Asian level. And the workforce in the informal economy was predominantly, in majority, was the home-based workers. And in Pakistan, the influx rate was very high. So at that time, at the South Asian level, there was a whole discussion. There were some visionary people from HomeNet South Asia, including Pakistan itself, where there was a discussion that there should be some platforms, some networks, who should focus on the rights of the informal workers, and specifically the home-based workers. So the informal economy at that time was very high, but in 2014-15, it's 74. And nearly 76% of the women had joined the home-based work sector in the last 15 years. And this is a trend that we have seen after 90s. And it has been discussed yesterday also that why there's an influx in the informal economy. But based on the countrywide enumeration, the total workforce of home-based workers is approximately 12 million. And as you can see, the 4 provinces, the percentages of the home-based workers. These are the figures that has been collected by some international organizations, and these are not the national figures. But the government is focusing on these figures and taking these figures for the policy level initiatives that are being done for the home-based workers. So 70 to 80% of the working population is employed in the informal sector, as I've already mentioned, and around 73 to 83% of the women employed at the national level operate in the informal sector. And this is predominantly the home-based worker sector. And there was a rise in the home-based worker sector, which was observed from 2001 and 2 to nearly 27%. And in 2005 and 6 onwards, it has risen from at the rate of 3.44% to approximately now 8.9% per annum. And presently, it is 10% per annum. So we can see and correlate why the home-based work has been expanded, and there is expansion. The problem analysis, when we look at the problems for the informal sector in itself is unregistered, unrecognized, and there is no official statistics data which can which can support the government documents or the civil society organizations or the trade unions arguments with the government. And they have little or no access to the organized markets, credit institutions, formal education, or public service and other utilities. So they are compelled to operate outside the legal framework and beyond the scale of social protection, labor protection, and any protective measures. The informal economy includes also the employment of the external workers that are declared by both the informal and formal enterprises and do not enjoy social benefits as mandated by the law or the constitution of the state. So the workers working in the informal economy majorly face these 5 problems or issues with regard to the employment deficits, rights deficit, social protection, representation, and since there is no representation, there are no rights, they are working in isolation, and growth deficit also, because they are not represented, they are not counted. So all the economic frameworks, they are out of the purview of the economic frameworks. And lastly, lack of access to financial resources because of the lack of awareness. These are the predominantly most important 5 factors and problems that are across informal sector. And when we talk about the home-based workers, they fit in there. And the reason is that they are not counted and they are not on the national statistics, and they are considered as unpaid family helpers. One of the major issues that we have seen in Pakistan is that in the informal sector and in the home-based worker sector, women are in the majority. And women, because of their invisibility in the national statistics, are not being catered as for the regulation of laws and other frameworks. And that is why they are not counted or recognized. And they are working, the products are visible, but where there are, the invisibility is too much. And as you can see, these are some of the case studies of the woman. This woman is no more with us, but when we were doing the survey with the support of Labour Education Foundation in Hyderabad in 2009-10, Ikhtiar Bano, she's 30 years old, and she's a bangle making woman, and you can see that she was working for 7 and 8 hours per day, and she was making 320 bangles, and what she was earning was 20 to 40 rupees. Similarly,
what's 20 to 30
40 rupees
in US dollars?
How much would that be? It's 102 rupees per dollar.
It's enough to live?
No.
No,
Less.
So that's 20 to 40 cents.
20 to 40 cents. Working for 8 hours. And making 320 bangles. Is a whole, it's called a Torah, where there are 320 bangles in that, and they have to embellish those bangles. And this is Shameen. She is a resident of Lahore, and what she's in the shoemaking industry, and she's earning 1,000 to 4,000 rupees monthly, and she's working for 13 hours per day, 7/24. And likewise, she's a resident of Gujranwala, another city, and she's stitching in garment and textile, and she's earning 100 rupees per day and working for 9 hours. So these are the discrepancies, these are the discriminations that we see in the home-based worker sectors. The most predominant issues that have been contextualized with regard to the home-based workers is that the visibility is a critical issue. They're organizing because they are scattered, they don't have organizational capacity, lack of awareness of all the rights, and availability of any success model, and commitment to engage in a network activities. They are not as organized as they should be. And they are not visible because there is no data. The products are visible, but home-based workers are not visible. And they are missing links. Market linkages and mobility is a serious issue. And policy and law, another important issue, because they are not counted, they are not recognized. So there are no policies and laws for the home-based workers as one of the labor law. They are not fall in the category, since they don't fall in the category of the workers definition, so they are out of the purview of the labor legislative framework also. Now, what needs to be done? That was the issue that home-based worker have. So categorically, when we were working for the home-based worker, we realized that since this is the issue, that what needs to be done, and then came the whole perspective of organizing those workers at the grassroots level, because they are the constituents, they need to be organized, and if we are working for the policy level, advocating for the policies and laws, it is important that the workers themselves should know what their rights are, what the benefits of organizing are. So to ensure their visibility, to create their market linkages, to go for the policy legislation, and all, it was important to organize the home-based workers to build their own voices and visibility at the local level. So what we did was we learned from the several global experiences, and one of the experiences at the South Asian level was of SEWA, where we learned, we got understanding of the concept of MBOs, because it was not easy for...
What is SEWA?
SEWA is the self-employed working women associations. Self-employed women association. It's of India. It was established 35 years back, and it's working as a cooperative model for the women in the informal sector. So being a member of the HomeNet South Asia, we learned from SEWAs and tried to replicate the best practices of SEWA. And one of the most important things that we learned was the concept of MBOs and cooperatives, and we held several sessions with SEWA also to understand those things. And then there was guidance from SBIGO and HomeNet South Asia after the Kathmandu Declaration. The whole strategizing for making the home-based workers issue mainstream was done, and one of the important things was building the constituents at the grassroots level. And what would be the model was, as I said, was the concept of MBO. So the MBO concept was, as we adopted that based on the 5 main principles: democratic, transparent, accountability, solidarity, and independent. It is basically the whole concept how a trade union is organized. And David sitting here, he was very supportive in facilitating HomeNet Pakistan in adopting the concept of MBOs in Pakistan. And taking that forward, some initiatives were taken in Kasur for the first time, where the model of MBO was replicated and piloted. And we organized for the first time 40 home-based workers in the chick making. Chick is a homemade blind where they use local, it's a stick, something. They make blinds out of that. The first organized MBO came from Kasur, and then later from Hyderabad Bengal Worker Association was formed with the facilitation of Labour Education Foundation. These are some of the breakthroughs that happened after forming or organizing home-based workers in Kasur. You can see that their identity cards were made. They were linked with health and education centers. Capacity building was done. Awareness on the micro level. Microfinancing services were made, and the group started working. And now the group of home-based worker in Kasur is one of the paid member of HomeNet Pakistan, and it is registered as a non-governmental organization. And the leader of that group is represented at the regional level, at South Asian level. Her name has been recommended. So after 2009, these initiatives for the leadership development are also coming. You can see these. The challenges that we faced in organizing as MBOs were the capacity building of the network members. Since we are a network with 350 members, and around out of 350 there are 60 paid members. So we, in order to give them the concept of MBOs, it is still a challenge. Identification of the home-based workers and the leaders is a challenge, and agreeing on paid membership, because these women are very poor, living under. Sorry, I'm just. So these were the challenges, as you can read, and you can see some of the initiatives, the conventions, the meetings with the home-based workers organized as MBOs. This whole initiative of home-based worker organizing was then translated into organizing the domestic workers by HomeNet Pakistan. After the Convention of Domestic Workers 189 came into 2011. And after that, we did a bit of prioritizing and strategizing as to what would be the best suitable strategies for organizing the domestic workers. And why it was needed was that there was the most important was that it is the domestic workers is predominantly again a women sector with women in majorities, and increasing women violence against domestic workers was another main reason. And the definition of home-based workers and domestic workers, it is very important to understand the discrimination, the difference between the definition of home-based workers and domestic workers. And for advocating for the home-based workers, we had started from day one during our advocacy sessions to disclose what is the difference between a domestic worker and a home-based worker. So that paved way. And as you can see, these are the domestic workers, and they are uncounted and unprotected. And when we did the organizing for the domestic workers, these are the materials that were published for domestic workers. The first union of domestic workers was formed in 2014, and with the support of Pakistan Workers Federation and some of friends here, the first union of domestic workers in Pakistan was formed, and the first convention was held in June 2014. During this whole process, we continued our engagement with the policymakers for the ratification and protection of domestic workers and home-based workers, and for the ratification of C-177 and 189, and ensuring sector-wise minimum wages for the home-based workers, and extending social protection for both sectors. So these are one of our policy advocacy points that we are continuously engaging with the policymakers. And our engagement with the trade union, at a certain point we engaged with trade unions strategically, so that keeping in view that this whole sector is in majority, and we need the support of trade unions to facilitate the organizing of informal sector. And similarly, we engaged with political parties, since this issue of informal workers has not been mainstreamed yet. So we started this process back in 2009 and 10, when we started our engagement with the political parties. And we had some successes as to what happened after that, all initiatives and interventions. That home-based worker issues is now recognized. There is a consensus on organizing the informal workers for their voices and visibility. An informal workers issue is one of the labor agenda. It has been included in the provincial labor policies. Unions of home-based workers and domestic workers are emerging. Draft policies for home-based workers and domestic workers are there. Draft bills for domestic workers and home-based workers are there. Inclusion in the political parties' manifestos of Pakistan People's Party, it is one of the main leading political party. After the interventions that we had with the political parties with regard to the manifestos, this came up. And home-based workers are now preparing for the local government elections in Punjab and Sindh. And one of the major accomplishment that we had was from the CEDAW concluding observation committee. The comments came, as you can read here, from clause B, C and D. This has become obligatory to the state now to report back to the CEDAW committee in 2017. So this is a landmark that we had achieved back in Pakistan, and now the government of Pakistan has to report back to this observations made in 2012-13 to the CEDAW committee. The major accomplishments, as I have already said, there are certain new things that have come up, that the government of Sindh and Punjab, they are piloting the registration of home-based workers. In Sindh, they are registering the Bengal workers, and in Punjab, they are registering 10,000 home-based workers in 3 cities. And based on the evaluation and based on the experiences, they would devise a strategy for registration of the home-based workers with the Labour Department. And there are proposed amendments in the harassment bill for the inclusion of home-based workers and domestic workers. And number of HomeNet Pakistan members of HomeNet Pakistan have adopted the methods of organizing, and organizing is being done at all levels. The modules that we developed with consensus of our members, and now home-based workers are being mobilized to participate in the local government elections. Now, these are the bottlenecks and challenges that I feel we still face. Who will organize the informal workers? Are the trade unions ready for this as the long-term program and not as a project? Ensuring implementation of policies for home-based workers and domestic workers. Who will do that? government, trade unions, NGOs. Spaces for right-based organizations are shrinking. More inclination is towards the service delivery. More focus on the skills and microfinancing as service-driven agenda and not as right-based. Leadership development and finding spaces for home-based workers and domestic workers. Absence of any strong and regional international discourse for home-based workers. And political commitment of the government or its political scoring. So these are still the challenges and the bottlenecks that I feel are important, and we need to think through some of the initiatives, and still, as a way forward, it's a long way to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. As I say, I'm going to take, maybe 2 or 3 questions right now, but we'll have plenty of time for discussion later anyway. So can I just see how many people want to come in? 1, 2. Okay, I'll take those 2. I'll give you a few moments to reply, and then we move to the next. Yes. Yeah, it was you. Yeah.
Okay. I'm from Nepal. Laila's presentation, the last, there were some challenges that is he highlighted. One, in Laila's presentation, Laila's experience, Laila's thought, what she can say about the HomeNet International could be a next global union in near future. Because you already have your networks everywhere, especially in developing nations. For example, like the IDWF was similar network few years back, but recently converted, transformed into a global union. Similarly, this HomeNet can be a global union for home-based workers. What do you think the possibilities?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Baba?
Yeah. There was something I was hoping for. It was a good paper, but recently working on migrant workers issues in West Africa and Nigeria, I realized something which I wanted to have light shed on in the context of Pakistan. Because most migrant workers, the informal economy is usually like first port of call, and then as domestic workers and all that. In our case, despite the fact that you have near identical nationalities in the neighboring countries to Nigeria, you actually have a wedge, like the domestic workers locally were of the view that the migrant domestic workers were helping to drive down wages. And when the Federation of Informal Workers Organization was trying to organize them, they actually wanted those ones repulsed. I wanted to know if there's any such thing, and if so, how has it been handled? The issue of migrant workers and domestic workers unity, or home-based workers unity.
Thank you.
In reply to your question, Mr. Tilak, there are some initiatives going on for taking this agenda to HomeNet International and HomeNet South Asia and Vigo. They are in part in discussion of taking this issue as one of the union or whatever, a membership-based organization at international level. So in coming years, we would be seeing such steps. But it's been like a decade now. It's like 10 years if we see from 2005 onwards, and if we see from the Kathmandu Declaration that was in 2000, it's been 15 years. Still now, as we have the IDWF for the domestic workers, we don't have such unions for the home-based workers at an international level. So at this point, I'm taking this opportunity to float this idea, how we can take this forward. I understand that there are some important meetings or consultations would be held this year also, and there was a global conference in Delhi earlier this year in February, where this whole idea was discussed. But we have to think through how that can be made possible. And taking the opportunity of this platform, I would like the guidance from the global unions here to guide us along the way. And some of my friends are sitting here, Cecilia and Karen, they are also aware of this fact. So we can come through with a strategy how to work or go towards forming a HomeNet International. And we can take those recommendations back to our people there. And to your question, Baba, migrant workers, yes, we have unions for the migrant workers, trade unions, those who are working for the rights of the migrant workers. But for domestic workers, no, I don't see there is any possibility at the moment. They are not united, they are not linked. It's a very relatively new phenomena of domestic workers organizing in Pakistan. As you can see, in 2014, the first thing came up. Now we are hearing of another union that has been registered by another trade union. So these things are emerging. But what I see is a disconnect with the migrant workers. The whole issue started in Pakistan because of the increasing violence against domestic workers. That became the triggering point. But now we have to work towards that, because this is another issue of migrant workers which the government is also focusing on, and we need to think through. I agree with you that if there are no initiatives at the moment, we need to think and discuss as what can be helpful for the workers and the migrant workers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And I'm sure you'll have opportunity to come back in the discussion afterwards. So
Thank you
if we can
very
have Myrtle. Okay, our next speaker is Myrtle Witbooi. She's from the International Domestic Workers Federation. She's also General Secretary of the South African Domestic Workers Union. She's been involved in organizing domestic workers all her life, and she's going to explain to us how it started and where they are now.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. As you all know, my name is Myrtle, and I want to actually title my presentation, "We Dare to Change Our Own Destiny." Why do I say that? Because I dare to change my destiny. And now, because we are united as domestic workers, we dare to change our own destiny. And the question should be asked, how did we do it? For myself, I don't want to speak about myself today. But to bring me where I am today, just a little background. I've been a domestic worker in the former apartheid years. I've been 12 years working as a domestic worker. I had no freedom. I had no voice. I had nothing. I even had no colors because I couldn't go and do education. But what happened? One day I dared to ask my employer, why come? I am different than you are. You are a woman and I'm a woman. We were the same age. But why am I treated differently? Why do you see me as an object? Why do you see me as something that don't exist? And it changed our relationship, and it changed my life, that I'm standing here in front of you today. What happened in the year 2006? The FNB of Holland called a meeting in Holland, and they invited domestic workers to come and speak about themselves. We went there was boxes of tissues, we cried, we feel so sorry for ourselves because, oh yes, we're suffering, all of us with our own pain. But what are we going to do about this? Are we just going to sit there and cry and go back and cry? Exactly. We went back to our countries. It was silence. We went on organizing domestic workers. We become successful in South Africa. We become part of our labor laws. Domestic workers have got all labor laws in South Africa. We are fortunate. We've got not a sympathetic government. We also have to push buttons to get us to agree. So 2008, the IUF, yes, IUF come, and IUF sent an invitation to us and say to us, we think we must renew what happened in 2006. But we're only going to call a few people to this meeting in Geneva. We went full of hope to that meeting. What are we going to talk about now? Because we said it all there in 2006. What happened? All of a sudden we feel that inspiration we feel we want to change things for ourselves. We feel that we want to talk about ourselves. And what happened then? From there, we decide, but we've got no voice. If we are so scattered in the world, let us form a little group. And we form a little group and we call ourselves International Domestic Workers Network. And I was fortunate to be part of this group. Now, what is this group going to do? Are we just going to be a network? And we decided to look at what is happening in the world and what is going to change. Then, of course, the ILO decided to put domestic workers on the agenda. And what happened when we come onto this agenda? Domestic workers really decide this is not going to be an agenda. You know, yesterday you were explaining that to apartheid and all. This is going to be an agenda that's going to be driven by ourselves. As domestic workers, we want to be at the ILO. So we were about 10 of us from different countries, Latin America, Amsterdam, Africa. What happened when we get to the ILO? If only people had prepared me for what is going to happen at the ILO. We always hear about the ILO. People, what is the ILO? What are they all about? We never prepared ourselves to be met with so many angry employers that had no respect for domestic workers, that accusing us of murder, that accusing us, and all we had to do at the ILO is sit still and listen to them. It was times you feel you want to get up, and you know, and you just want to go and grab one of that employees. Please, the protocol of the ILO, okay? So yeah, that's what happened. So yeah, I'm chosen as a spokesperson. But I am, you mustn't do that, you mustn't do that, you mustn't do that. And I'm looking at this employer, I'm targeting this employer, this from the employer's body. And every time he stand up, all of us, because he's starting to attack us, and he started. But we were so strong. We were angry. We feel that we need our freedom. We feel that we don't need to be insulted. But we, because we are domestic workers, we are very respectful. We respect the protocol of the ILO. We respect everything because when you're a domestic worker, you're used to, yes, madam, no, madam, excuse me, madam. So you're used to that. So it was nothing strange happening to us. So then, what happened? We had a very good spokesperson for ourselves, and every time the employer said that, and it went on for the year. 2011, we already went there to the ILO, we're feeling already. Oh, what is going to happen now? What happened? Maybe God created a miracle, but that same employer was out. And here we've got a new employer. And he stayed in the same hotel with us. Oh, it was so fantastic. Because now, it's there in the day and in the evening we can invite him for dinner. Schaffhauser was very good in that. In the evening we have an informal. But what happened is that employer was actually seeing things differently. He understood what we're talking about. We were talking about us. We were talking about give us the respect. Let our work become decent work. And what happened? Of course, you all know its history. Yes, we've got Convention 189. There was tears, there was crying, there was everything. But now, do we simply want a piece of paper? A beautiful paper by the ILO to say if you have problems with your government, you can report to the ILO. Is that what we want for domestic workers in the world? It's simply a piece of paper. We've got many pieces of paper in our countries. Lots of countries have got labor laws and beautiful paper. So what are we going to do with this paper? Now we have to work on our governments because they have to ratify Convention 189. Now if you go to a domestic worker in the street and you ask a domestic worker, do you know Convention 189? She is going to absolutely look at you. This woman is mad. What she's talking about. But if you say to this domestic worker, what do you want? How is your working? Immediately she open up and you take out this document and say, this is what it's all about. It's about you. So now we want to teach you how we can use it. And that is how we start mobilizing in South Africa. And we start, but there's something missing. There's something missing. It's like we say in South Africa, sorry, comrade, if I can't say your name, we say that in South Africa. Like you were saying, what is going to happen to the domestic sector? So we were thinking, yes, we've got Convention 189, but now, what are we going to do with it? I was simply just walking with that paper we won. So there's something missing. We start thinking, how do we bring domestic workers across the world together? How do we form an organization for domestic workers? Impossible. And then my good friend Dan Galant should be there. It's not impossible, Myrtle. Why you call it impossible? You know, Dan was always educating me since I can remember. And Dan said, it's not impossible, Myrtle. I said, Dan, he said, think. And what we did, we come together and we start talking about our stuff. Yes, we need an organization. No, we need a federation, not an organization. So how are we going to do it? Yes, we start mobilizing, we start getting domestic workers together. Where will we launch this federation? Now we think in Geneva? No. Holland? No. Uruguay. Why are you choosing? That's where the president is a normal person. The president will talk to us. The president will laugh. And we went there. Strange but true. When they said to me, I must go and greet the president, I was looking for the guy with the suit. And here the guy came with the jean and he said to me, hi. And I said, yes. And he said, I'm a president. I said, oh, sorry. And he said, no, you don't have to say sorry. Because and then he said to me, you want to see my car? And I said, oh, and he said, that's my own car standing there. And immediately we feel, oh, here is somebody on our level. Here is somebody that we can relate to. And we launched this federation. I didn't know what was going to happen to the other federation. Well, that's heard there was something that you are now the leader of this federation. Good. At my age, it was something good because I was moving for retirement. But again, when we now launch and we choose our own executive, and we have this 10-plan, how we're going to conquer the world, we decide that to the male, we don't want any men in our study. And immediately, African men jump up from Zimbabwe and Zambia. This is not fair. I said, this is going to be the first federation in the world that's going to be run by women. Former domestic workers that was working in the backyard of the kitchen. We are going to, and if we make a blunder, it will be our blunder. We don't need you to come and mess up. After a long debate, yes, we won. We've got women in our executive and we've got women in leadership. Now, of course, the speeches is coming. Again, my friend Dan, I must mention him. Dan was actually saying, Myrtle, do you see this road? And I'm also looking at this road. And they say, you have to walk this road once again. And I took up that challenge. I'm going to walk this road, irrespective how old I'm going to get, and irrespective, because the world needs us up there. So what is the role now of the federation? The role of the federation is to empower domestic workers. The role of the federation is to tell workers to stand up, free yourself. And I want to make an example for myself. If I could get up in apartheid years and challenge my employer, not knowing what's going to happen, if I could be thrown in jail and spend time away from my children, not even knowing where they are, we can do it because women, as women, we've grown strong in that backyard of that employer. And this is what we want to do now. We want to challenge the world. We want to say, this federation is not about Convention 189. It's not about 21 countries has now signed and ratified. But if you go into that country, what is really happening in that country? Yes, there's the ratification, there's the national minimum law. How does it meet each other? Are you really implementing this Convention 189? And are you really doing so? The task of this federation, and I'm not going to allow you to question me. You're going to tell me how you're going to help us. Okay, at the end. So, this federation wants to build in Africa, and I want to say to my comrade there, Baba, yeah? In Africa, we've got 17 organizations. At the moment, we're 120,000 workers. We are the strongest within this federation at the moment, and then Latin America. We have also got a small group of workers in Nigeria that we're busy with now organizing, because our coordinator is from Tanzania and she's busy now. We don't want to leave out any workers. It is not about money. It is not about what you bring in organization. It is what we can give you, how we can empower you, how we can tell you to speak up for yourself. Every day of our life, we have requests. Now I've got a double role to play. I'm the international president, and I also run my own organization in South Africa. So every day there's requests from small organizations, from migrant workers, from everywhere to ask us, how can you become part of your organization? All we need from you is that, even if you are the NGO, but you've got your own constitution, you've got your own set of laws, you can be part of our organization and you can become part of our federation. We have now decided to take, shall we say, the bull by the horn and go to the Gulf countries. We have now entered Lebanon, we have entered Egypt, we have entered, we're going to enter Jordan now, and we are going to Qatar. Wow. I'm hoping, I've been in Qatar, I didn't do anything because I went to visit there, my children were staying there, but I've seen everything that's happening there, so I'm actually ready for Qatar. But I'm not sure if they look at my thing, if they will allow me. But we are hoping that we can do it before in the next year we want to do it. In Lebanon, we formed a union. We formed a union this Saturday, and the Monday while I'm still there, the authorities come and they say, "Sorry, you cannot have a union here because migrant workers is not citizens of Lebanon." So we started a campaign online. There's online that you can join this campaign to put pressure. All of a sudden, the ministers now announce there's some labor laws for domestic workers, but that is not what we want. We want the domestic workers to feel free to organize themselves. So this is who we are. The International Federation is about domestic workers. It is about workers that want to be free. It's about workers from your country and my country. So my request here today to you is that I can go the whole day on about domestic workers. I can tell you, but my request to you is, how can you come in? How do you see yourself assisting our federation? How do you see yourself within your country going to that domestic worker sector as a trade union, as maybe a federation? How can you really go there and say, here we are, we want to assist you with something, we want to strengthen you, we want to help you. If we can get that, I can assure you that in maybe a year's time or 2 years time, I think we've got more than 1 million domestic workers. And this is what I hope for. Empower domestic workers, not domestic workers that's just on the book. The ILO just launched My Fair Home campaign. My Fair Home campaign is launched together with our network, our federation. My Fair Home campaign means I'm going to give you a paper, and you're going to go to your domestic worker, and together you're going to talk about that paper. And you say, yes, I agree with the 10 points on that paper. When you finish, you and your domestic worker will sign that your home will be a fair home for the domestic workers. And this is the new campaign that we're starting now with the ILO on bringing the convention into the homes of the employers. And that is one way that we can also mobilize and get. And then the ILO want to launch a co-op for domestic workers. We are fortunate that they've used that Sexuel in South Africa. They're launching that co-op tomorrow in South Africa. but a co-op that's going to provide skills development, a co-op that's going to provide financial services, and also part of empowering. If this works, they want to spread it out to other countries and see how the ILO. So the one way, yes, the ILO is also trying to assist domestic workers. But we understand they're also controlled by government. So we need to do it ourselves. And for that, I thank you for allowing me this opportunity to be here. I want to say to you, work with us, like Dan was saying. Work with us that road. Help us to strengthen ourselves. Talk to the domestic worker where you are living and ask her, do you know about this federation? Do you know about your labor? And I think together we can do it. One thing I want to say, when we won Convention 189, I'll never forget how I felt that day. It was like 45 years of my life was playing. I was sitting in a back room 45 years ago. And today I was standing in front of the tri-party and telling them what we want as domestic workers. And that was the greatest moment in my life. A domestic worker, telling them what we want. And when we walk out there, to that day, we've got our freedom, our dignity, and our respect. And we're not going to allow anybody to take it away from us. I thank you all.
I think we all agree with a brilliant, inspiring, and funny presentation. So thank you very much for that. As I've done with the previous presentation, I'm going to take a couple of questions before we move to the next one, and then we'll have the. Okay. Well, I've got two, so that's perfect. Okay. Yeah, you're first.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. I'm Shahnaz from Pakistan, and I work with the Foundation. As Laila was mentioning in her presentation, that organizing home-based workers in Pakistan is very challenging. It's challenging everywhere, I know that, but sometimes in the societies which are so patriarchally divided and gender divided roles, it even becomes more difficult. And there is only one domestic workers union, and some organizations are working and they are forming different groups. But I want to ask how we can engage more with International Domestic Workers Federation, and how we can learn more from your experiences to strengthen our work in Pakistan.
Okay. I'll take the second one. Yeah, the second question?
Actually, it's not a question, just to add to the federation. It's a one very good example. They are not just a federation in a paper, because Sri Lankan Domestic Workers Union also part of the member of that federation. Last week what happened, there was a domestic worker raped by a judge in Sri Lanka. So first thing, Domestic Workers Union sent the information to all the local trade unions, the women's group, only two groups from outside, one is the federation. Within 15 minutes time, right, the first reply the Domestic Workers Union got it from the federation and saying that what type of help you really need from us, right, tell us. So Domestic Workers Union managed to communicate with them. It's just, I want to add this, it's really practically the solidarity, right? They always make it and they ask what you want, support from us, right? So that's just what I want to add to that.
Excellent. Yeah, I think what I would like to say too, that if you want, to get involved with us, support for us, you can write to us. Where our main office is in Hong Kong. We have got our own network, Karen, yes? And then I will give it to you, my card. And then you can request that what you want from us, how you want us to assist you. Also what happened was that campaign, once there's a campaign, we open it up on our network and we ask people to actually respond to, we've got a social media network, and we ask people immediately to respond to that campaign, and that is how we strengthen that campaign in that country. But you can also give you all the details, and then that is how we can. We are trying to assist many organizations and with help, and if possible, like always funding, we try to see how we can assist. But we are open to assist anybody, so you can apply to us. Thank you. And like you say, what can you do is to make sure that more domestic workers know their rights, and more domestic workers, this organization, so we can become some force that they must be reckoned with in the domestic worker sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's most inspiring.
Okay. Our last speaker is Thierry Schaffhauser from the STRASS, which is Syndicat du Travail Sexuel, sex workers trade union in France. He was one of the founder members in 2009. Thierry also worked 5 days in the UK, and he organized sex workers with the GMB union. Thierry.
Hello, comrades. I've been a sex worker for 13 years now. I started working on the streets in Paris. Now I work as an escort, and I do also a bit of porn and webcam work. I want to thank you to invite me, because it's quite rare when we are invited to trade union meetings, and especially I think it's the first time we're invited at the global level for a labor conference, so thank you for that. I will how do you just back in? Okay. So we start the presentation. Some history to start. I think sex workers have always organized, but the history will remember 73 as the first organization. But I tend to think that we were present during revolutions, and we did many part. We were part of many struggles. But it was recorded in 73 when Coyote was founded by Margot St. James in California. Coyote means call off your old tired ethics. It's remember as the first one. 75 is the occupation of churches in France. So the first image above is one of Griselda d'Israël, who was a Swiss sex worker but was very influential in France because she spoke French. Below is a picture from the English collective of prostitutes, who was founded in 75 as well. But the strike is from 1982, when they occupied a church in London to protest from police abuse and racism, because many migrant women were targeted as well. So often the first organization, they were, I think we always thought ourselves as trade unions, but the word sex work itself, it was coined only in 79, and the main demands were often on decriminalization. So all the labor issues, I think it wasn't always addressed from the beginning. I think it was with the time that more and more organizations actually call themselves unions. So the first thing I think what you have to do as a trade unionist is often to map your industry, and the sex industry is quite vast. There are many sectors with many differences between each of them. So the porn industry is legal, I guess, in most part of the world. But it's quite difficult to organize, actually, because we often meet with other workers when we do the shooting, and often the guy who's filming you is often the director of a small website or of the company. So actually it's difficult to talk with other workers we meet, because often your employer is here, and it's often very short period work, because it's only the time of the shooting, like one afternoon or one day, and most of the time you don't have contract. In the UK, when I did films in the UK, I just signed papers to say agreed to leave my my rights for my image, and a proof of my ID that I was over 18, but that was all. No, it was just cash money they give to you, and then it's just like there's no work contract, anything. In France, we have a work contract, but it's just for 1 day contract. But more and more companies get their office in other countries, so they have less. What do you call that? Like social security. How do you call that? When they have to pay less, but because in France they have to pay more for protection, social protection, so often they get registered in other countries. So it's also an issue sometimes. Webcam work, online or sex conversation on the phone. It's often employed work, but it can be also freelance work. So sometimes you have companies where everyone is on the same workplace, but sometimes you work from your own home, and it's just through internet that you get rules and directions from an employer and a manager. Striptease, pole dancing, lap dancing clubs. So here you have clear workplaces, but still it's often also freelance work, because often the employers, they don't want to give contracts, and so you don't have necessarily employment rights. There's a good documentary that was made in the US. It's called Live Nude Girls Unite. It's about the story of the unionization of the Lusty Lady Club in San Francisco. And it's one of the most successful stories in our movement, so I really recommend to watch it. It happened in the 90s, and they were successful in forcing the employers to have a work contract, to have the right of union representation. And at the end, the employer, he was fed up, and he just sold the place, and they bought it, and they would run it as a cooperative. And so it's really fantastic story. Then outdoor sex work. So mostly people working without employers, obviously. So it can be like on the streets, in the forest, in many places. Indoor sex work. So it can be, well, according to the country, it can be legal or illegal. In France, most of that is illegal, but because it goes against all the procurement laws. So most of this type of works, either it has to be hidden, or the sex part of the work has to be hidden, which which makes it difficult to organize, because often the co-workers, they don't want us as trade unionists to be visible in the workplace, because if they become visible as sex workers, then it can be dangerous for them, because as soon as the police arrive, or the neighbor complains and calls the police or anything, well, the workplace is closed and they just lose their job. So you can imagine it's a bit difficult to organize. And the last is escorting. So in France, most of escorting jobs are about independent work, but you also have escort agencies that are based in neighboring countries, and so you can have also where people are employed, but same thing, you don't necessarily have employment contracts. It can be decontractualized. Okay, what obstacles to unionization are? The first one I would say is criminalization. So in France, officially, sex work in itself is legal, so you have the right to sell sex. While in many countries, even the fact to sell sex is illegal. But still, there are many parts of the sex industry which are illegal. For example, we have soliciting laws. So it just means the fact to be visible in the public space, on the streets or anywhere, because now we have even the passive soliciting articles, which means that the police can actually arrest anyone they want, just if they suspect you to be a sex worker. So yeah, actually it's very broad definition, and it's often directed at migrant sex workers, and in places where there are gentrification politics, where the mayor or the cities, they want to get rid of sex workers, basically. We also have procurement pimping laws, so it means that advertising is illegal. It means that your landlord can be considered as pimp, so obviously it's difficult to rent a place, to work or even to live sometimes. It means that any transaction with anyone can be considered as pimping, so it's illegal as well. So it makes things very complicated. Just two people working together, you can't do that. It's considered as a brothel. So like there are many women that, for instance, they want to work together for safety reasons, but they can't do that. One of them, or sometimes both of them, or all of them, they can be charged for brothel keeping. So it's an issue as well. Then the other obstacles, there's no tradition of trade unionism. I think it's because in the 19th century, when the first trade unions started, often they excluded women, and also I don't think they considered sex work as work, and also I think maybe there was some classism in a way, because we were seen as the under-proletariat. So we were excluded from the labor movement for even until now. So obviously it's difficult to then raise awareness even in our own community about trade unionism. There's no shared workplace most of the time. So it means we are isolated from each other. So obviously it's difficult to organize people when you need first to know where they are. For example, when I talked about mapping, I forgot to say that also you need to be careful, because often it has to be confidential. You don't want the police or authorities to know where sex workers are. Actually, I don't write. I don't do a written mapping. Everything is in my head. So I know all the street sex workplaces in Paris. Maybe not all, because it changes all the time, but I think I know almost all of them. But I don't write it because in case anyone finds it. So yeah, no shared workplace. Many languages spoken. Because now there are many migrants working in the sex industry. The last 15, 20 last years. So it's a big barrier, and we try to do classes with each other. So I tried to learn Spanish because many sex workers in Witbooi in Paris, they are from Latin America. We have a Chinese sex workers group that got created as a result also with STRASS support. So some of our members tried to learn Chinese as well. So I didn't try that yet, because I think it's a bit complicated, but if I can speak Spanish already, it would be a good start. So yeah, the language classes is from both sides. Like the migrants, they try to learn French, but also the French people, they try to also learn the migrants' language. And differences of identities, I think it's also as a role, because in terms of gender identity, nationality, the ways of work, there's a lot of divisions within the different type of sex work. So obviously people don't often feel from the same community, because we're not in the same places, we're not in the same we don't have the same backgrounds, but the same identity is to be a sex worker. So how do we build from the same experience and identity, when even within the sex industry it can be different experiences actually. Okay, so next, how do we organize? We have what we do. We do legal advice and paralegal activities. So what we did is we hired 2 legal advisors. At first, we were not sex workers, but we asked them to train us. So now the legal advisor who is officially working for STRASS is a sex worker, She also studied law, so she has a master's degree in law, but she also was trained by our legal advisors, and she's now in charge of producing all the legal advice and what we call paralegal activities is all the support we give to sex workers who try to get justice, basically. It can be about when they were victims of violence or exploitation, or it can be anything. It can be anything regarding the law and justice. And so one of the first things often people ask is if what I do is legal or not. How can I do if I want to register myself as self-employed to get pension rights? Or so often there are questions, and so the first thing we did is actually to produce this information and to distribute it everywhere we can, because then sex workers they are stronger when they know actually if what they do is legal or not and what are their options. Because, for example, they can be guys who arrive and say, oh, what you do is illegal, and I want, they try to take advantage of you, or they try to harass you, or try to get free sex, or anything. And sex workers are able now to say, well, actually, what I do is legal, but the fact you harass me or you threaten me is illegal. So if you want to call the police, actually, you're the one who is breaking the law, and I'm not. So the strength can be more on the worker side when you know the law and your rights. So yeah, information sharing is sort of the work. Distribution of condoms and prevention material. So what we did is we contacted HIV organizations to try to get free condoms. Basically, we distribute that everywhere when we visit all the different workplaces. When we can, because in some indoor workplaces, they can't have condoms in the workplace because it would be considered as a brothel. So that's a big issue, because in massage parlors or in peep shows or in many places you're not supposed to have sex, or you just like have a naturist massage, or just the client is watching, but often actually it can happen that in the back room or in private you can have sex with them. And in that case, often it's not protected. So it's very big issue in terms of health and safety conditions. But yes, it's part of the work we do. And often giving a condom is the first way to then. It actually can be an excuse to engage with people, because you have something to give. It's not just like if you arrive and you just want to talk, and actually often you disturb people while they're working. So at least you have something to give and you can initiate the conversation. So we provide also safe spaces. It can be physical places, like we don't have an office because we don't have money, but still we ask the HIV organization to let us use their office. So once a week, it's for Paris. In other cities it can be of other organizations, but for Paris it's so once a week. And I think it's also online forums, and we organize also collective meals and parties. And I think it's important because stigmatization is a very big issue. Yeah, it was mentioned maybe earlier, but I didn't talk about that. You know, for example, if you want to appear as a sex worker openly, it's impossible for the majority of sex workers because you will be discriminated against. Your children will be bullied at school. Your parents will be like, "What are you doing?" Like your family people will be like, "But why do you do that?" And you have to explain and justify yourself all the time. So many people don't say they're sex workers. They want to protect their family. They want to protect their children. So it can be very complicated. And just have a safe space where you can meet with other sex workers. Sometimes we do meetings and we don't even talk about work. We just talk about the issues around boyfriends and how do you deal with like social problems and stigma. So having a safe space is really important. We do an annual conference, so we've done that for quite many years now. And it's time when we share knowledge and experiences, and it can be about organizing itself, but it can be about anything. campaigning and activism. So often it's about decriminalization campaigns, but it can be about many other issues. Training and organizing. Also, we try to do that. Okay, so I'll try to be a bit quicker. What we do differently from other unions is fighting police abuse and violence. So we had some cases we won in court. For example, a sex worker was raped by police officers. Before that, you couldn't complain and you just have to live with it. But because the voice of one sex worker against a police officer, the justice would not believe you. But with the union, the fact that we organize and we gather evidence and all that, and we provide support and legal support, I think it's one of the things I'm the most proud of is that actually get justice against that. Support for undocumented migrants, same thing I think in other unions, like recently La CGT, it's one of a big trade union in France, they say, oh yeah, with the first trade union we provide information for undocumented migrants and we support them to get papers. But actually STRASS does that from the beginning when we got started. So actually we are the first one, probably we do that in France, but the other unions they don't know about that apparently. And same thing, we won some cases and we managed to get some regularization for undocumented migrants. Actions against forced labor and human trafficking, so we went in court also to support victims of trafficking. We fight against exploitation, despite the conflation between trafficking and sex work, and as I tried to explain earlier, in workplaces where you have an employer, officially the employer is considered as a pimp. So the only official and legal tool we have is pimping laws, but these laws actually they are used by the police and the government, but most of workers, we don't use them because it's counterproductive, because most of the time it just means you will lose your job. So how do we organize from that? It's quite complicated because we have to invent, and for the moment it's a very difficult issue to try to fight exploitation without having actually efficient laws to do it and have the labor laws that other workers have. I think feminism and LGBT rights are very important also in our movement. I'm thinking about transgender women in particular because for example, we demand the right to change your gender in the documents, and I think it's very important because otherwise you're excluded from the labor workplaces in general. And many trans women do sex work because they don't have other jobs they can do because of transphobia. HIV and health, it's something historically that has been very important for the movement because most of the funding and support we got is from the HIV movement. And many organizations of sex workers in the world, they are actually sex work projects or health projects, and they manage to organize through the issue of health because governments, they won't fund you to do trading and organizing, but they will fund you to give condoms and educate other sex workers about that. So it's something important. And individual support, it's like, for example, just an individual level. If you're sick or you don't know how to take care of your children, well, we try to help each other because you might not want to have to explain that you're working at night and your children has to be taken care of, or sometimes you have mental health issue, but people will think, oh, it's because of your work that you have these problems. So it can be difficult to find good support actually. Understanding of exploitation, I tried to talk a bit about that. So, yeah, what I wanted to say about that is that we often think about exploitation in the workplace, in the work, but not outside the work. And for the sex industry, landlords, advertising publishers like newspapers, police corruption, and even legal practices of fining, all of these things are also forms of exploitation because when your landlord is considered a pimp, what you end up having to do is to pay 3 times the market price to someone who accepts to rent your place, because most of people will say, I don't rent place to a sex worker, I don't want to be breaking the law. So yeah, that's different issues. To summarize about informal work, I think it's often freelance work, but it doesn't mean you don't have an employer. So the employment relationship can be hidden. often deconstructualized labor, many criminalized workplaces, many undocumented migrants, and the traditional weapon of strike is often not relevant, because if you are freelance and independent worker, if you go on strike, it doesn't really make sense. Observations I wanted to do to make is the connection between the different types of sex work and the need for solidarity. So, for example, there are many sex workers who work in bars or massage parlors or peep shows, where in places where they are employed. And because of the big turnover and the fact that they don't have labor laws, or it's difficult to challenge the employer. So most of the time they just leave and they try to work independently. But then you realize that when you try to work independently, for example, if you work on the streets, then you will be repressed for soliciting. So then we thought that even if maybe it's not thought as a way to force us to work for employers, actually the system works in a way that you accept to work in exploited environments where you have to leave, 80% of your wage to an employer, because you think it's safer. You have co-workers in the same place, and you accept these conditions because you think at least I'm not on the street. So the links, actually, we should think that campaigning for one or the other is actually in the goods for all workers. The link of criminalization to the industrial carceral complex, I think it's part of a broader system. Same thing about the effects of globalization and liberalism in terms of migration, in particular, the fact that migrant women are using sex work as an economic resource. I think it also explains why sex work is criminalized, is to maintain these workers more vulnerable. Some successes, so we managed to decrease police abuse in some places. There's more solidarity between workers, in particular less racism, because when migrant sex workers happen to be the majority in demonstrations, then the white French sex workers were like, oh, actually there are more defending our rights that our own community does, and then they decided to change their discourse. So I think it was an interesting success. Sex workers are better informed, and undocumented migrants managed to, in some cases, we managed to gain papers, cases won in court, and we passed from 200 to 500 members. Okay, then what you can do to help? So pass motions for decriminalization and labor rights for sex workers in your own trade union and labor conferences or other organizations you're part of. Invite sex workers to public talks. Organize informal workers by opening branches in your trade union. Fund and support events to organize informal workers. Fight austerity and for the rights of women, migrants and minorities, because the sex industry grows when there's an economic crisis period. So obviously fighting poverty, austerity and all that, it will help sex workers because we rely a lot on public services and on the welfare system. And the GLI manifesto needs to include the demand for the decriminalization of informal labor, including sex work. So if unfortunately I leave on Friday morning quite early, so I won't be here. But if you can include it in the manifesto, it would be amazing. And thank you for listening to me.
Well, thank you very much. I think it's a very unusual presentation. I'm really pleased we were able to hear that. I was getting pressurized by Dave, who said that we need to finish early because the commission need time to work. But in the meantime, I didn't want to cut off Thierry. 5 minutes, yeah? So I think I'm going to take obviously question for Thierry, but also if you wanted to make contribution generally about the afternoon, was there any, is it for Thierry in particular? Or? Yeah,
I wanted to ask you, is there an international network? How do you liaise with other organisations elsewhere similar to your own?
Okay, will you write it down? I'm going to take all the contribution. I'll give Thierry 2 minutes to answer all the questions if they... Yes.
Yeah, hello. Well, I have to
recognize that it has been a little bit controversial for me, your presentation. First of all, because you are a man, and unfortunately, most mostly women, most of the sex workers are women. In my union, there is no fixed position on it because we have, there is this big debate in between what's going on with. There is a need for regulating those workers who are working in the sex industry, but at the same time, and I think you didn't. I mean, you talked about exportation, but I have these. I don't have particularly personal fixed debate on that. But you didn't mention anything about, for instance, human trafficking, which is drama.
I didn't.
So how do you deal with that? In the case of Spain, it's been a big drama because most of the workers, sex workers, are foreign, are migrants. They are not. They don't have rights. They are fired from the city center, and they are forced to work in a very insecure places most of the times, and they are not free for working, and they don't enjoy their body. What do you think about the fact that a lot of feminists, I'm a feminist also, that, I mean, I have this question about, yes, for the regulation, but at the same time, it's like an assumption that our body can be used as an object, as a simple object,
Do you want to keep it short because
yeah,
there's few people.
The other thing you mentioned about transgender, I found this very interesting. We are working with LGBT for LGBT rights, and do you think that if there would be different options for most of the transgender women, they would choose another profession? Sorry for.
And I'm sure that Thierry won't have time to answer all the questions, but you can talk afterwards. Okay? So, yes. I'll pick people who haven't necessarily spoke before.
Thank you for a remarkable presentation and absolutely amazing expertise. And you will be considered to have a part-time and working for French politics. Because I think you experience and you passion on part-time probably join or something like that.
Okay. Can I just have an indication how many other people? Okay, we've got. You've both had questions before, so I'll pick people who haven't spoken before. Yes, and you.
Thanks a lot. I'm almost hooked to tears. It's so great to see sex workers getting organized, and I think we can all agree that the only way your press can fight back and take the right is by organizing. So my question is, I mean, I'm also a very active feminist. I'm also a proponent of Scandinavian sex work legislation. Then you very often end up in a situation where you can talk about how to increase organizing, because it's a discussion of feminism, legislation, and should we all talk about organizing. So I'm just wondering, what's your normal trick to deal with this kind of discussion and push it a bit further so we don't have to talk about organizing?
Okay. I'll take one and then I'll make an observation, and I ask Thierry to wrap up. Sorry for other people who wanted to ask questions, but Thierry is staying for a while, so.
My name is Paula Garrity. I'm with the USI Union Solidarity Ireland. And I think that this has been such a controversial issue, particularly in Europe. There have been models and ways of organising in Vietnam and Cambodia, in many places all over the world. And it seems as if it's, I find that, I'm a feminist too, but I support the rights of sex workers. I support the rights of workers all over the world and their rights to organise. And because it's not regularised, or it's because it's difficult, it's not an excuse not to support or not to assist people who want to organise. And I think that because there's such a discomfort about sex, and I think that the starting point is to talk about sexuality, sex, human interaction, human relationships, and in terms of the gendered notion, it's an interesting question that Thierry is here, and it's true that most people who work in the sex industry in Western Europe anyway, to the best of my knowledge, are women. However, Thierry is the exception that kind of proves the rule. And I don't think that we should be blaming people for who their representatives are. And there's all sorts of circumstances and situations why that is the case. But I think that feminism has to look a little bit deeper and re-examine the very foundation philosophies which are around this. And sometimes it is a passionate distaste for the notion of whether it's the feminism of Andrea Dworkin, where women's bodies are commodified. It is problematic and it's not easy. But I think we have to have the conversation, we have to have the debate. And the very unfortunate thing about the Swedish model is that it conflates trafficking with sex work. That is just wrong.
Okay.
We cannot do that, and thank you so much for that. But I want to offer my support and my solidarity to the absolute brave work in the face of all the stigmatisation. The people who should be supporting sex workers haven't been showing that support. And I think that we have to provide that commitment here at the GLI and think really deeply. What are the problems within our own organisations, our own thinking, our own philosophies, which act as barriers and obstacles to supporting some of those marginalised and vulnerable people in our society. We can't just turn our heads away because it's difficult.
Thank you very much. And I'll abuse my chair position just to say that I'm really pleased that my trade union, PCS, has not adopted yet a policy on decriminalization, but I've commissioned some research because we found that lots of our own members, because of austerity, because of low wages, have got to become sex workers. So I just wanted to say that. You've got 30 seconds. No. 2 minutes.
All right, okay, I'll try to be quick. About the international level of organizing, STRASS is part of the Global Network of Sexual Projects, so it's a federation. Global Network of Sexual Projects. It's NSWP. You will find their website online. There are about 150, maybe 200 organizations around the world in I don't know how many countries. So it's quite a big federation. Yeah, there's a lot of work going on around the international network. We're also part of ICRC, which is the International Committee for the Rights of Sex Workers in Europe. So it's the European network, and well, there are many different regional networks all over the world as well. You talked about need for regulation. Actually, the word regulation is not the word we use. We talk about decriminalization, but we don't use legalization or regulation because often it can mean laws that are meant to organize us in a certain way that will maintain forms of criminalization. So, for example, in some countries, you will have big brothels will be legal, and then street sex work will remain criminalized. And often it means that in the brothel you won't have the choice of your clients, of the practices, of the use of condoms. And actually these laws are more in the benefits of employers than workers. So we have to be careful about what we demand, and we prefer to talk about decriminalization because then it means all sex work should be decriminalized, even migrants, even drug users, or even all types of sex workers and sex work. About exploitation and trafficking, yes, actually, we fight against that by trying to give support to the victims of trafficking. And what I notice is that actually most of the time the victims, they don't go to the authorities, and the reason is because there's no guarantee of protection and migration status, legal papers. And so their interest is quite limited because maybe they can get papers for 6 months, 1 year, the time of the trial, and then after that they will be deported. So often they prefer to, well, they try to get rid of their exploiter by themselves or with the support of some local organization. But we are very good at having many repressive laws to criminalize trafficking, but in terms of providing support for the victims, it's still not here. And I think it's where we should work more if we want to support, to fight against trafficking. Because then also, in terms of reporting the crimes, this information is not shared with the authorities because there's no trust with the police. Even for sex workers in general, and even for the victims of trafficking.
Will you maybe answer other questions?
Yeah, later. Okay. All right.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but we really need to finish, and I'm sure we can have plenty of conversation with Thierry, but also, with the other presentator.
If you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you again for the